Hi everybody, this is Jamie Ruthenberg and you are watching the very first episode of what I call Book and a Bite. It's a new YouTube series that basically marries literature and the culinary arts. It's great books meets great food, which is basically two things I really love in life, and somehow I brought it together. I'm going to talk about a book and the writing aspects of it and possibly the artistic aspects of it, and then we will kind of move into the kitchen and make something incredibly yummy, an incredible recipe that is related somehow to the story. I actually start out with a book that's near and dear to my heart because I actually wrote and illustrated it. It's the fourth book in the Miles series, Miles being the main character of the series, and it's called Miles Finds a New Friend. I love this book. It's about being a friend to someone who needs a friend most. And the whole series is about treating others as you would want to be treated. And there's a new character in this book named Henrik. And he's the new kid on the block. And I can relate to him because in fourth grade I moved from my beloved school in Detroit, and we moved to a new place out in the suburbs. And it was kind of rough in the beginning. So this is a wonderful book for kids to read, to really empathize with others around them, especially if they're in new circumstances. There's also an educational layer to this book and the whole series. And there are comprehension tools in it that teachers are using in the classroom. There's letter writing formatting, handwritten letters that Miles actually writes to the readers, but you barely ever see anymore. And there's also different genre elements. Miles writes poetry in one of the stories. He also writes a short story in the other. So there's a beautiful layer of education that teachers can use. What I really love about the series is the artworks, which I do in pencil and watercolor myself. And my goal was to reflect the warmth of the emotion of the series in the artwork itself. And in this particular book, the setting is a fall setting. It's an autumnal feel, and it's warm. And I think that you and possibly the children in your life would really, really love and enjoy just the feel of the visuals of the artwork. There's also what I think is the most fun aspect of this entire series is that every one of the books there is a recipe on the back cover, because usually it's Miles' mother. In this one, it's actually Henrik's mother who makes some special recipe in the kitchen. And then at the back cover, there's the recipe so that the readers and their families can actually experience what Miles ate within the story, and his friends and his family ate within the story. And today, on the back of this newest book, Miles Finds a New Friend, is apples and cream pie. And actually, although it's in the story Henrik's mother's recipe, it's obviously actually mine, and it's one of my favorites. I've never met a person who doesn't love this pie, and today we're gonna make this baby. Let's go. So let's start with the pie pastry. Actually, I do a homemade pie pastry with my food processor. I love this thing. It's a lifesaver. Now, some of you might not have this, or you might really not be interested in making your own pie pastry. I understand that you can buy it at the store. I will be honest with you though, nothing beats homemade pie pastry. I just love it. So I'm going to make it here today in case you're interested in doing it as well. It really does make the pie. And what you do is you first start off with 2 sticks of ice cold butter cut up into little cubes, and you have to make sure that it's ice cold because that's what makes the pie pastry really flaky. Then you add 2½ cups all-purpose flour, along with a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of sugar. So a teaspoon salt, then what you do is you put the top on, and you pulse this for no more than 30 seconds because you don't want to process it too much. But if you process anything with flour in it too much, it makes the flour tough and the pastry tough. But you want to pulse it until it resembles coarse meal. And I think we're looking good. So once it looks like coarse meal, you take ½ cup of very cold, ice cold water, and you slowly put it through the feeding tube. And then I pulse it again for a while until it just starts to hold together. It's not wet, it's crumbly. Again, you don't want to over-process. Okay, so now what I do is a little different than a lot of other people do. I have a little trick up my sleeve. I take plastic wrap. Most of the time I would divide this in two, wrap it up in plastic wrap in little balls and put it in the refrigerator. I have a little trick. I take sheets of plastic wrap. Now you're only going to need a single pie crust. This makes two. I tend to take a little more and make the pie crust a little thicker for the single pie crust pie. Turn out part of this onto here, and it's going to be crumbly. I'll use a little more than usual. I like it thick. Set this aside for a second. Now kind of work it together with your plastic wrap. You're gonna love this. What I do, put another couple pieces of plastic wrap on the top and roll this out between the sheets. That way you're not adding any more added flour, because you add flour to pastry and it dries it out. So this way, I use a French rolling pin. I like how the center is a little thicker, helps with rolling. Okay, now I think it's ready for the next step. And this is the beauty and the magic of this. This got a little warmer. You want to try to keep it cold. Sometimes you have to pop it back in the refrigerator. But for the sake of talking to you now, I'm just going to move forward. I take off one of the layers of plastic wrap, and I generously spray Pam all over the inside of a pie plate, and voila, I put it right inside. So what you're supposed to do is allow your pie pastry to rest for a good hour or so. And usually, like I said, people ball it up, put it in the refrigerator, bring it out, and then they're rolling it out. I put it in the pie plate so that it's already nice and set in there, and let it rest in there. And if I had a second, like a top pie pastry layer, I would roll that out, do the same thing, and just keep it between the two layers and set it on top of this and put it in the refrigerator. It works miracles. It's wonderful. This is very warm. I really don't want to work with this right now. I'll do a pretty fluted end to it, but I'm just gonna kind of put it together and pop it in the fridge, and we will be all set to go. There we go. Then what I do is I basically just take those pieces of not the pieces of pastry. I would take the pieces of plastic and actually fold it over so you're sealing it in the pie plate itself. I love this trick. You gotta, if you make pies, you'll love this. I'll be right back. I'm just popping it in the refrigerator. Okay, so now that we have our pastry chilling, I'm going to actually make the filling for the pie. And before I start cutting into the apples, I'm actually going to get the cream, that vanilla cinnamon cream together, because you really don't want, once you cut those apples up and they start to get brown pretty quickly. So I'm going to get the liquid to the filling done, maybe pop it in the refrigerator for a bit while I work on the apples. So what you do is you add to 1 cup of heavy cream, 3/4 cup sugar, 4 tablespoons flour, 1/4 teaspoon salt, a 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, 1/8 teaspoon freshly grated nutmeg, and a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. So now it's time to prep the apples. I usually use a mixture of Granny Smith and sometimes Yellow Delicious, or whatever's good and in season and a nice consistency when it's baked. But I'll tell you something, it's Honey Crisp, say that 10 times fast, season. And they're beautiful, and I've never made a pie until maybe about a month ago with Honeycrisp. And it was a happy accident. It was the only apples I had in my house, and I made a pie with it, and it was the best apple pie I've ever had in my life. If you can get your hands on a Honeycrisp apple, or several, for this pie, do so. And by the way, this recipe calls for 6 medium-sized apples. These are ginormous Honeycrisp apples, so I'm only going to use about 4.5, maybe 5. It goes a long way because there's a lot of filling along with it. So first what we're going to do is we're going to peel the apples, and then we're going to have them and then quarter them and then cut the core out. and then thinly slice them. Okay, so now we're ready to assemble this glorious pie. I took out the pie pastry, I took out the filling, the apples are all sliced thinly, I should say. Gotta watch your adverbs. So at this point, since it's chilled, what you want to do now is you want to actually crimp the edges. Okay, so now I've crimped all the edges. It makes it very pretty, very pretty presentation. Now comes time to actually fan out your apples. I like to make a little like rounded fanning pattern, but you don't have to. You can actually throw them all in there for a more rustic look, as they say, but I like it to look pretty. It really is a spectacular, a beautiful presentation. The fanning is complete. It's very pretty, but now's the fun part. Now is when you take this beautiful cinnamon spiced cream and drizzle it all over the top, and cover all the areas. It is completely covered. At this point, I take that extra heavy cream that has all those spices. Heavy cream is a nice glaze for pastry because it makes it nice and glossy and dark when it bakes in the oven. And I just kind of go around and take a little pastry. I take a little pastry brush and just make sure that you moisten. A lot of people don't like that word moisten. I'm not sure why. I kind of dig it. These apples smell amazing with the cinnamon and the vanilla and the spices. Unreal. I can't wait to have a piece of this. Alright, so at this point, and by the way, I have extra apples left over. A little trick to munch on them later, put a little lemon juice on them, just pop them in the fridge, and they won't turn brown on you, and you can munch away. So I'm going to keep these for later. So now, we're ready for the oven. I have here a baking sheet, because just in case this pours over a little bit, and then you've got, you know, all the smoke and your fire alarm going off. This has happened to me way too many times. So I always put it on a baking sheet, and I cover the sides just around, just to kind of like cover and protect that precious pastry, because it tends to burn when it's fully exposed to the heat. Now I'm going to just put this around. I love this. I love the baking sheet as well because you can just lift up the whole thing and put it in the oven. It's very convenient because it's a little bit of a task to get this cover around the corners. Now you're going to bake this at 400 degrees. I tend to bake it long. A lot of people say for an hour, pies like this. I like to bake this for probably somewhere between, depending on the heat of your oven, an hour and 15, and sometimes I even go to an hour and a half because it just takes that much time for all the apples to meld together and cook the right way. Keep an eye on it though, because usually around an hour, sometimes sooner, I need to put aluminum foil all over the top of it as well and just kind of put a little dome so that the top doesn't burn. So okay, this is going to go in for hour and 15, hour and 30, 400 degrees. Hi there. Well, here it is, and I couldn't wait. I had to cut into it. I have to have a piece while I'm talking to you. But what I did is I baked it for about, isn't it beautiful? I baked it for about an hour and 20 minutes, and then I let it rest and cool on the counter, and then I popped it in the refrigerator. It is important for it to really chill. A good 3-4 hours overnight is perfect as well. It's so funny, I kind of feel like Miles right now, because Miles at the end of every story, and also in Miles Finds a New Friend, talks at the very end of the story, he talks to the readers, and he sits at the table and he asks them, have you ever felt like I have in this story, or like Henrik, or have you ever read a story or heard of a story like this? It's great comprehension tools that teachers like to use in the classroom. You can get the recipe below, and please remember to subscribe. So finally, I have to try this because it's just amazingly delectable looking. It's so good. It's hilarious. It's fantastic. It's the vanilla cream and it's falling apart. That vanilla cream with the cinnamon and nutmeg and those Honey Crisp apples that are just bursting with flavor. It's phenomenal. You really do need this in your life. Trust me. I hope you make this week. Thank you for hanging with me, and I'll see you soon. And he asked them, you know, have you ever had anything, ever felt below? I get every Thursday, and I hope you have a great, And please remember, bring this actually fully full. It tends to burn. Let me have more.